This episode may contain content of a graphic nature, including descriptions of physical and sexual violence against adults, children, and animals. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi everyone, I'm Tanya.
And I'm Talia.
And we are Crimes and Consequences, a true crime podcast. Hi Talia.
Hi, Tanya.
How you doing today?
Great.
Great, fabulous,
I'm
wonderful.
Doing really great. Thanks for asking.
Well, that's good to know.
Mm-hmm. You know how I'm fucking doing. Why are we playing this game
Really?
again?
You're not doing well?
I'm doing fine.
Yeah, you're doing just fine. I have a new episode this week. And before I get into it, I would just like to ask everyone to hit the subscribe or follow button on your favorite app that you're listening to us on. And I'm just going to get into the story.
Yeah, knock it out.
It was early September of 1982 in Rome, Georgia, at the Regional Youth Development Center.
What's that?
So I'm going to refer to this as the RYDC.
Okay.
It's a facility for troubled adolescent girls. The phone rang one night, and a staff member named Kenneth Dooley. He was the one that answered the phone. On the other line was a woman who claimed to know his wife. During their conversation, she asked for directions to their personal home, not like this home. Not thinking much of it, he gave the information, and the call ended shortly thereafter. However, his wife, and they had only been married a few months, claimed she had no idea who this woman was. In the end, they just shrugged it off, and they really didn't think about it again. That is, until the night of September 10th.
It is kind of weird, though.
Right? Very weird. On September 10th, a young woman called asking for Kenneth, but he was out. She called back a little bit later, and this time she got him on the line. She waited patiently for him to come to the phone, and when he picked up the receiver, expecting to hear a woman's voice, he was unpleasantly caught off guard because on the other end was an angry male voice. And the man told him, "You're going to pay."
Oh.
So Kenneth was dumbfounded. Like, he just couldn't understand.
Pay for
what do you mean? Later that night, 4 shots were fired into his home, 2 of which penetrated his study. He managed to see a car speeding away, and he called the police, and no one was hurt. He wasn't sure exactly what he was reporting.
Well, that's fucked up.
I know, like, what?
I've never had any shots fired into my house.
No, me either.
That would freak me out.
I know, right? He didn't know if the shots were intended for him or someone in his family, but it definitely worried him. He had a new wife, and his 2 children were in the house with him, so there was obvious cause for concern.
Are these children from a different marriage?
Yeah, like from a different marriage. He ended up staying wide awake that night. I know, right? I wouldn't be able to sleep either. He soon, though, would find out he wasn't the only one being targeted. The following night, another RYDC staff member, it was her turn.
Oh.
A homemade Molotov cocktail was thrown into the home of Kenneth's coworker, Linda Adair. Apparently, her husband was reported saying that Linda received several phone calls from a young woman just prior to this incident. But when Linda had gone to the phone to take the call, there was no one on the other end of the line. Right after the firebomb was tossed, a neighbor boy reported seeing a brown car with cream-colored stripes speed away with a man and a woman with long reddish hair inside. When the flames were extinguished, the police examined the bomb, which had been constructed with a simple bottle, cloth, and gasoline, like your typical, I guess, Molotov cocktail.
Yeah, I'm typically
I've never made one.
I've made cocktails, but not that one.
Right. At first, they thought that Linda's arson inspector husband was the target, but they soon discovered that to be untrue. While the police were still in Linda's home, another phone call came into her home. Again, it was a young woman who this time told Linda that both her and Kenneth Dooley were going to die that very night.
Oh, wow.
It was obvious both of these assaults on the RYDC staff members were intentional and meant for them specifically. This call, along with another one made later to police, proved that these 2 attacks were linked. The motive behind it was anger and revenge from a woman who refused to give her name and any other information, except for the fact that she was the victim of sexual abuse at the hands of the RYDC.
Oh.
Luckily, her call had been recorded. So
she called the police, told them, listen, I
did this because I was a victim of sexual abuse.
Oh, okay.
They recorded these calls so that could be used when they were looking into it. Police promptly had Linda take a listen. And while she said the voice sounded similar to the woman who had called her at home, she wasn't able to identify the voice as belonging to anyone she knew from the RYDC or anyone else that she knew, for that matter. The police searched for clues and interviewed people at the RYDC, trying to figure out who exactly might have been responsible for the incidents and decided whether the allegations of abuse had any substance. Unfortunately, since no one had been harmed in the attacks and since there were no clear leads, the case went on the back burner. On Saturday, September 25th, 1982, so this is a couple weeks later, 2 young girls were approached on the western side of Rome, Georgia, by a woman who wanted to know their names. It turns out this woman, and spoiler alert, it's the woman that made the original calls.
Yeah, I got that already.
Her MO was to pretend she knew one of the girls as she approached them, calling the girl by a wrong name intentionally. This is her way, to get information.
Right. Okay.
Once the little name mistake was set straight through naturally conversing, the girl had managed to learn one of the girls' real name and where she lived. After this, the woman would continue to pressure her about going with her to ride, get in my car, we're going to take a ride, which really sounded odd, but both of these girls managed to avoid her. However, not all were as lucky. 13-year-old...
So these 2 escaped?
Yeah, these 2 escaped.
Alive.
13-year-old Lisa Ann Milliken was one of the unlucky ones. Lisa was on an outing with 5 other girls from the Ethel Harpst Home for Neglected Girls in Cedartown. I know, that really sounds like a sad place. They were visiting the Riverbend Mall, which is the central shopping area in Rome, Georgia at the time. It had a video game arcade for families and teenagers, so the girls liked to go there. Lisa wouldn't have known this, but 2 years earlier, a woman had been robbed at gunpoint at that same mall on the day before Halloween. Interesting enough, the very woman who had been arrested for the robbery and spent a brief time at a juvenile facility, the RYDC, was now luring Lisa away from the mall and her friends toward a brown car. 1 minute, she was with the other girls being told to meet at a certain spot, and by the time they were all back together again, Lisa was gone. 3 separate searches were made, and then the police were called, but Lisa, they didn't find her. The worried social worker who had accompanied the girls on their mall trip said that Lisa had been wearing jeans and a white and black patterned blouse. Several days went by, and there still was no sign of Lisa, and no leads either. That is, until the same female caller made 3 anonymous phone calls to the police directing them to Alabama's Little River Canyon, which was about 35 miles away from where Lisa had disappeared.
What'd they find?
Well, these calls were initially received and recorded, but when they checked out the area that the caller told them to go to, they didn't find anything. Then police in Alabama took the next 2 calls. A call also came in to a Rome radio station claiming that the police were covering up a murder done by a female juvenile officer. The caller named Lisa Ann Milliken as the victim. So the police thoroughly searched the area once more, following the concise instructions given. The caller said, you're going to find her body.
Okay.
Finally, just as dusk was coming on September 29th, they spotted the still figure of a child draped partially over a tree trunk.
A child?
Yeah, face down on the canyon floor. A pair of jeans hung from a branch nearby. As they got closer, they could see a bullet hole in the victim's back, showing her death wasn't an accident, and instead she was murdered. It appeared as though she'd been thrown down from the 80-foot height onto these rocks. I know. As they carefully brought the body up to the top in a basket, a woman who had known Lisa from one of the juvenile facilities positively identified her as Lisa Ann Milliken. She had finally been found. Lisa's autopsy revealed that she had been subjected to a series of brutal attacks.
Aww.
And she's only 13, Talia, if you remember. She had been raped. She was injected in the neck with something that, boiled the fat under her skin.
What?
I know. And the county coroner described the, under the skin, like her flesh or fat was the consistency of anchovy paste.
What?
Crime scene investigators also found 3 plastic syringes near her body, which were sent for fingerprints and further substance analysis. The crime lab came back stating that the substance found in the syringes had the basic components of like liquid Drano. So she had been injected.
Oh, no.
Yes. She had been injected several times. The jeans, I know, poor Lisa. The jeans that had been found hanging from the tree had red splotches of blood on them, but they turned out not to be Lisa's pants.
What?
Which is really strange, and police thought maybe the pants belonged to the killer.
Well, they don't know if they're guys' pants. I mean, are these guys' pants, girls' pants? Like, what are these pants?
I believe they were probably girls' pants.
Okay.
Detective Sergeant Kenneth Kynes was assigned to head the investigation into Lisa's murder. The only thing that they had to go on thus far were the calls that had been made. Each one had been recorded. So, Detective Kynes started there first. Investigators listened to each of the calls made to the various places regarding Lisa, and some of the investigators agreed that the same woman, it sounded like she'd made all 4, especially when the transcripts were typed out. Once everything was in front of them, they realized the clues were in how she talked, like the phrases and in her accent. She sounded fairly young, and many things she said indicated she was familiar with the juvenile justice system. Investigators checked whether Lisa had any enemies. I mean, who's an enemy of this 13-year-old girl?
Right.
While it turned out that she was not popular, there seemed to be no specific grudges that might make someone wish to kill her. The police figured that Lisa's abductor was probably from the Rome area rather than Alabama, since the first calls had been made there. And they interviewed everyone they could think of, from the girls at the home where she had been placed, to former neighbors, to her destitute father who had allegedly molested her. He interviewed her mother, who had a boyfriend fresh out of prison.
Oh, that's nice.
Many people were given lie detector tests, and some looked pretty good as suspects, but no one emerged as a viable person to continue to investigate. It seemed that Lisa either had friends that no one had known about, or she had been abducted by a stranger. Even as the police were busy with this crime, another one was taking place on the streets of Rome, with another victim targeted for similar treatment. I know. On October 3rd, cemetery worker John Hancock, which I think is kind of funny, but John Hancock, and his fiancée Janice K. Chapman accepted an invitation from a complete stranger to go riding around.
What? Like, how? Like, what do you mean? They're just hanging out at the cemetery and someone's like, hey, you want to go for a ride?
They're just on the street somewhere, and a young woman in a car who was a complete stranger to them.
Convince them somehow to go have some fun.
She lured them into her car by giving them a pitiful story about how she was lonely and she just wanted some company for a while. So
I'd be like, what the fuck?
I know. I'd be like, what?
I'm busy. I got shit to do. I'm not hopping in the car with you.
But this couple got in, and as a Christian, John later said, he felt obligated to do what he could for her. So he and Janice got in. During the ride, they talked with the woman who showed them her Cobra CB radio, and she got into a conversation with someone on the other end called the Night Rider.
Stop.
I know. The woman went by Lady Sundown, and she acted like she didn't know Night Rider. But this would soon prove to be untrue. John and Janice had CB handles of their own.
Oh.
So when John noticed the weakness of the frequency that the driver was using to chat with Night Rider, he wondered what was going on. After all, this Night Rider character seemed to be quite close rather than where he said he was. He communicated with Lady Sundown in a code that was foreign to John.
Okay, that's weird.
Yeah, I know. So John just relaxed and went along for the ride. But then to John's surprise, the woman took them outside of town. She came to a stop where a rather large man was apparently waiting for them in a red Granada. This man was the mysterious Night Rider.
Night Rider.
Night Rider. John introduced himself and Janice to Night Rider, and Night Rider said he wanted to find some alcohol. Then they all drove away together in 2 cars to get another spot that was miles away from where they had all come from. Night Rider pretended he was looking for a place to get liquor, but really he was just trying to get them lost, and John lost all sense of direction, so he had no idea where they were. To John's surprise, he was allowed to get out of the car to pee, but when he did, Lady Sundown walked up to him with a handgun and ordered him into the woods.
Well, shit.
She walked him down a narrow road, and then he heard Knight Rider yell at her, like, "Get it over with." She told John, "Don't worry about your girlfriend." Knight Rider yelled again at her, and then John felt a shot go through his right shoulder, and he fell to the ground. Fortunately for him, Lady Sundown was in a hurry, and she didn't check to make sure he was alive or not. John was shocked and dazed by what had just happened, but he was still alive. He knew he needed to act fast, but he had to wait and make sure that the coast was clear before he could get up. After laying there for a bit, he managed to regain his strength, and he ran to the road, and he flagged down a truck driver.
But what about his girlfriend?
She's nowhere near them.
I guess he couldn't have done much to save her anyway.
No, he probably couldn't. The truck driver took him to the hospital, and that's when a nurse called the police. Although John had been shot in the right shoulder, he would recover. He gave police his version of the story, but the police weren't completely convinced for a few reasons. They initially suspected maybe it was a drug deal gone bad.
What?
Since John was saying that a woman had shot him, and he didn't seem to put up any kind of fight.
Okay, why is that making it a drug deal?
I don't know. And then they just didn't like his, mannerisms, I guess, while he talked to them. He was, easygoing, and even though they didn't think he was lying, he seemed oddly unconcerned about his fiancée or even about his own attack. It seemed to be a rather strange story anyway.
Yeah, it is a fucking fucked up story.
Yeah, getting into the car with a strange woman you don't know. Even so, there had been a number of reports over the past few days of people being approached by a woman driving around in a brown Dodge with white stripes, so at least that lent some credibility to his story. John was able to supply a description of Lady Sundown and Knight Rider.
Stop.
They gave police a break in all of these recent puzzling cases. However, it didn't come out during his interrogation. Instead, when they were going to give him a polygraph, he overheard Detective Kynes playing the tape of the female caller.
He recognized the voice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He was like, "That's the woman who shot me." So he told his story again to Detective Kynes, and he offered physical details so that they could do a composite sketch. For Detective Kynes, this was a real break in the case. John wanted to help in any way that he could. He even agreed to submit to hypnosis as a way to refresh his memory. Maybe there was something.
Right, he's missing. That's in your subconscious.
He was taken to Atlanta to have this done, and he was able to remember one thing, and it was that there was a bumper sticker on one of the cars that he hadn't previously mentioned. He also rode around town with Detective Kynes in an effort to see if anything he saw could jog his memory.
About where he was?
Yeah.
Because you said he was lost.
Yeah, he was lost. After Detective Kynes was certain that all of the anonymous calls were made by the same woman, he went back to Linda Adair and Kenneth Dooley. And remember, they were the ones at the beginning of the story that had their home attacked. So Detective Kynes decided to bring them both in together. And he wanted to know from them whether something had occurred at the RYDC to a girl who might now
want to seek revenge.
Yeah, exactly. The two both denied that there had been any kind of sexual abuse occurring at the facility, and they said that they didn't even know each other outside of being coworkers. Detective Kynes went over all of the files of the girls who had been sent to the RYDC due to crimes they had committed, and narrowed his list of suspects down to 5 with prior records. Among them was Judith Ann Neelley, and she fit the description given by some of the witnesses. In addition, she had been involved with an armed robbery, so they knew she was comfortable using a gun.
And they can give her mugshot to John.
Right. So after doing some digging and investigating, Detective Kynes discovered that Judith was married to a man named Alvin, and they both had police records. He then placed their photos in a lineup to show John. Absolutely. John hesitantly picked out the Neelleys as his attackers, but he said he'd want to see them in person, just to be sure.
I don't know.
He said, it was a long night, and the guy...
Well, yeah, it was a long night, John.
Yeah, he said, and the guy in the photo, Knight Rider, he had a beard, so it was hard to tell.
I can see that. I can see that.
As it turned out, luck was in the police's favor, seeing as Alvin and Judith had been arrested for other crimes, so they were conveniently in custody in Tennessee.
Oh, so they're literally arrested at that point.
Yeah, they're arrested at that point.
So this is right after what happened to John, though?
Yes. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Judith and Alvin, these two winners.
I can't wait.
Judith Ann Neelley
was born a loser.
who was also known by her CB handles, which were Lady Sundown or Lady Goodyear, and she also went by the Bride of Frankenstein.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. Judith was born in Mumfreesboro, Tennessee in 1964. Her father died in a motorcycle accident when she was 9, and after he died, Judith's home life went from bad to worse.
I bet.
Her mother was arrested for contributing to the delinquency of a teenage boy, and I'm not sure exactly what happened.
That doesn't sound good.
No. When Judith was 15, she met Alvin Neelley, who was 12 years her senior.
Oh, gross.
I know, very gross. Although he was larger than most football players, so he's a big dude, he had a face most people thought was sweet.
Stop it.
No,
they didn't.
Born in Georgia.
Who the fuck said that?
I don't know.
His face was so sweet.
He was very sweet. Born in Georgia, he was a car thief with a friendly demeanor, who was more than...
A car thief with a friendly demeanor. Oh.
He was more than happy to give Judith a way out of her toxic situation at home. Their chemistry was instantaneous and undeniable. Neither could imagine life without the other. However, Alvin was married at the time.
No problem.
Yeah, he decided to get a divorce.
So he could be with his 15-year-old girlfriend?
Exactly.
Okay.
And his wife really wasn't all that upset to see him go. And then Alvin and Judith eloped in Georgia in 1980. So she was like 16. Judith fit in easily with Alvin into his life of petty crimes. They were constantly on the move, robbing convenience stores and gas stations from Georgia to Texas in order to finance their on-the-go lifestyle. As they came into the Riverbend Mall parking lot in Rome, Georgia, they finally made a mistake. In 1980, they robbed a woman at gunpoint and were eventually caught trying to cash stolen checks, which led to their arrest. Since Alvin had outstanding warrants in several states, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison.
Ooh.
Judith, on the other hand, ended up at the RYDC.
Oh, there we go. Ding, ding, ding.
Ding, ding, ding. She was pregnant at the time and gave birth to twins.
She's pregnant with twins.
She was then transferred to another facility in Macon, Georgia. Judith spent much of her time writing to Alvin, telling him how much she despised the staff at the RYDC, and she claimed that they had sexually abused her. That's just it, though. All of her allegations have been denied by the staff there, and police found no evidence to support them, so I can't confirm or deny whether they were true or not. Even so, she managed to get Alvin feeling like he needed some revenge due to these incidents. Okay. She got him all riled up, so now they are on this war path for the RYDC.
So how long did he do?
It had to have been...
Less than 5.
Yeah, it was less than 5. It was definitely like
a year.
A year and a half. Judith was released toward the end of 1981, and since she had nowhere else to go, she ended up moving in with Alvin's parents in Tennessee until he was released from prison. But her stint away didn't help much, as she returned right back to her old crime spree ways.
Surprise.
She was arrested again after robbing another convenience store.
What?
And I don't know what punishment she got, if any, but Alvin's parents took care of the twins.
I wouldn't even know how to rob a convenience store. I don't know. I'd be
I don't know, right?
Excuse me, can you just give me all your money?
Yeah, stick them up. I don't know.
Stick them up.
Stick them up. Within 6 months, Alvin had been granted an early release, so he did all of a year and a half. So the two picked up where they had left off, leaving their kids behind.
No.
They needed money, so they learned how to steal checks from post offices and use their signatures to forge money orders, which became their primary means of supporting their lifestyle. I don't know how you forge money orders, but...
I don't know.
This is back in 1982, so who knows. To keep track of one another, they installed CB radios in their respective cars, and Alvin became the Night Rider and Judith Lady Sundown.
That's just so cool.
They even gave themselves the nicknames of Bonnie and Claude as a joke about their resemblance to the bank robbing outlaws.
I get it.
Bonnie and Clyde. It's so stupid.
I get it.
Bonnie and Claude.
That's so clever.
So hysterical.
So clever.
Yes. In September 1982, they found themselves in Rome, Georgia again and decided to launch an all-out attack, which ended up being much of what I've told you earlier about the attacks on Kenneth Dooley and Linda Adair's residences, as well as the kidnapping of Lisa Milliken. In this account, I'm going to tell you about all these crimes, came mostly from Judith. Judith described that they abducted Lisa Milliken from an arcade and said she looked like Joni Cunningham from Happy Days.
What? Okay.
They kept her... This is really sad, what they did to her. So buckle up.
All right.
They kept her captive in 2 different hotel rooms in Georgia and Alabama for 3 days. Judith and Alvin had sex with Lisa and kept her handcuffed to a bed, which forced her to sleep on the floor. Then at Alvin's direction, Judith took Lisa to a remote canyon in Alabama and tried to inject her with drain cleaner products they had purchased for this very purpose.
Horrible, Tanya.
I know. I can't even imagine what this poor girl went through.
If it touches your skin, it burns.
Yes. But Lisa didn't die like Judith hoped or expected. Lisa was moaning on the ground and complained of being in pain. I mean, obviously. Judith kept shoving the needle into her 6 times in the neck for more than a half an hour before she accepted the fact that these injections weren't working. Lisa was burning and she was cold, but she wouldn't die. The girl begged Judith to take her back to the Harpst home. That's that girl's home that she was at, but that obviously wasn't going to happen. In the end, Judith decided just to kill the girl quickly, and she used a .38 pistol to shoot her 3 times. 1 bullet went through Lisa's back and out her left breast, which was the shot that ended up killing her. When Judith was certain she was dead, she shoved her over the edge of the canyon. Judith would later say that Alvin had masturbated as he looked down.
Oh, gross.
I know, at the battered corpse.
Fucking gross.
But Judith's description of this incident to the police indicated she'd been alone. Alvin, too, denied ever being there, so I don't know if this really happened. But Alvin also denied raping Lisa before he finally said that he had indeed had sex with her, but only once.
Only once.
So it was difficult to know what the true story was. He had even tried claiming that Judith had masturbated him into ejaculation and then put the sperm into Lisa herself.
Oh, stop. The bullshit.
I know. Only when the police refused to buy that did he admit to sexual contact with Lisa. And before I tell you more, we're going to take a break. 5 days later, Judith went searching for another victim. This is 5 days after they murdered Lisa. She saw a woman at a payphone that appeared to be by herself, but Judith was unable to get her into the car, like to go riding around with her. That woman would remember later for the police the strange feeling she had when Judith approached her. Fortunately for her, she had called her husband to come get her and therefore didn't need a ride. Soon afterward, Judith spotted 22-year-old Janice Chapman, who was John Hancock's fiancée. And even though she was with a man, Judith thought, with Alvin's help, they would be able to manage this. After all, they could get rid of the guy and take the girl with them. Judith pulled over, invited the couple to go with her. I told you everything that happened. The CB and blah, blah, blah. So remember Janice, I never told you what happened to her. After Judith shot John and left him.
Yeah, I don't know anything about what happened to Janice.
She and Alvin took Janice, who was mentally disabled. I'm not sure how. So they took her to a cheap motel nearby. They raped her repeatedly and then shot her. They drove her body to a wooded area near a creek and dumped her. And that's what happened to poor Janice. I know. So it seems now that they've gotten away with murder twice.
Yep.
You know, Lisa and now Janice. So they were ready for another. But they needed money first, so they went into Murfreesboro, I'm probably saying that wrong, to pass some of their forged money orders. Thankfully, someone recognized them from a police flyer, and they were arrested. So that's why they're sitting in jail in Tennessee. Once in police custody, each began to point the finger at each other.
It wasn't me, it was him.
Yeah.
He made me, I'm just a victim.
Exactly. It seemed to be every man for himself. Alvin was quick to lawyer up, effectively shutting down the interrogation, but his attorney urged him to tell police what he knew. Alvin claimed that Judith had instigated the crimes and was responsible for 8 murders. And that, he had just gone along with her.
Oh, wow. That's true love.
He said 8. He said she liked to have power over others, and in that moment, he didn't know what else to do. He even went as far to say he was afraid that his wife might kill him. Sure. He's like this big dude, right?
Shut the fuck up.
He made sure to emphasize how dangerous Judith
very dangerous.
really was.
I was scared for my life.
Yes.
Fuck off. By the way, he raped.
Yeah, teenagers, right? Alvin apparently believed her tales about sexual abuse at the RYDC and thought she had a good reason to be angry. But he also gave the distinct impression that he didn't want to commit
I didn't want to.
the rape and murders.
I absolutely didn't.
Right. But really, this wasn't quite
It's all
believable. 'Cause
bullshit.
why don't you just walk away?
It's all bullshit.
Alvin also claimed that the weapons all belonged to Judith and that she
Okay.
had killed the two girls because of some rage that she carried around with her. At first...
And what'd he do to stop it?
Yeah, nothing, right?
In fact, one of them was in a hotel
Yeah,
for days.
exactly, with them.
And they were raped.
Yes, absolutely. He participated. At first, Judith did accept the blame, exonerating Alvin every step of the way. In her own confession, she described her final moments with Lisa and Janice, and she admitted to the firebombing and the shooting into Kenneth's house. But she said she did that because Kenneth Dooley had raped her, and that Linda Adair had set it up. But it didn't matter what either of them said or told police because...
those are the people from...
The RYDC. Yeah.
Okay.
That's why she was angry with them. It didn't matter what either of them said or told the police because they would both change their minds and their stories several times. So who fucking knows what happened?
Shit.
Yeah. Not to mention, things would change after getting lawyers and preparing for trial.
Of course.
Alvin told authorities how Judith had killed Janice Chapman and gave directions to where they could find the body. He even drew a map implicating himself at least as an accomplice. It wasn't long before they recovered Janice's decomposing corpse. She had been raped, shot to death, and dumped in a wilderness area, just as he described. So now they had 2 murders and 2 suspects. It would seem to be cut and dry, but it wasn't. After all, these crimes, the murder, rape, and assault, had all been committed in different counties and in some cases different states. Not to mention the evidence against Alvin was kind of weak.
Except for the rape.
I know.
I mean,
they could get him for Janice's murder, but not Lisa's.
Okay, well, that's one.
Yeah. Alvin remained in Tennessee and pled guilty to his part in the kidnapped murder of Janice Chapman in exchange for life in prison. Judith, on the other hand, faced first-degree murder charges in Alabama for the murder of Lisa Milliken, and with her confession, they had a good case against her. She was extradited there for trial with possible death penalty hanging over her head.
Shit.
Yeah. Judge Randall Cole presided over the proceedings. Alabama had a 3-count indictment against her: murder, abduction with the intent to harm, and abduction with the intent to terrorize. Her defense relied heavily on the insanity plea.
Okay.
Based on battered woman syndrome.
knew it. I knew it. She was going to say that.
She went through psychiatric examinations, but proved to be competent enough to stand trial. Which,
there's a difference between being influenced and being battered.
Right, exactly. Even so, her defense put their best foot forward in claiming that Judith was a pawn for Alvin and that he had beat her into doing the things he wanted, like capturing and raping young girls.
Did he beat her?
Not that I've ever heard, no. The trial began 2 months later after these arrests and the extradition, and Judith's defense put everything into the fact that Alvin controlled Judith and made her do his dirty bidding. They even brought in Alvin's ex-wife to describe her years of alleged abuse in Alvin's hands, and she claimed to have many scars from those days.
And that might be true.
Maybe.
But I'm not going to kidnap some girl.
I know, right? I mean, I don't know.
Hold her for days and kill her and kill a guy.
Yeah. And so now it's Judith's turn to take the stand.
I'd rather just die than do those things.
I mean, some people, I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
She was grilled for 4 days. She went into extravagant detail about being a victim and being deathly afraid of her husband, Alvin. She claimed that if she hadn't done what he wanted, then he would have killed her.
That might be true.
Maybe. According to her, everything from assault to murder had been done completely under his direction. Apparently, he was the mastermind behind everything. However, everything Judith was saying contradicted everything she had written to Alvin.
And you know what? She's still fucking him. Like, they were still together, making sweet love.
Yeah, sweet love. Right?
And all that.
Come on. When the prosecution presented their case, John Hancock testified, as well as 3 different girls that Judith tried to pick up. But she was unsuccessful in doing so. And all 3 of these girls said there was no sign of a man anywhere when these incidents took place.
But that doesn't mean he doesn't have control over her.
Maybe. Not to mention, a psychiatrist came on the scene and talked about how Judith had known the difference between right and wrong at the time of the offense, and she had consciously decided to commit murder. Even if she was brainwashed, she still had a choice, and the psychiatrist stood firm on that statement.
That's true.
So now both sides closed their cases, and the judge gave the instructions to the jury. The jury received the case on March 21st, 1983, fairly late in the afternoon, and by the next morning they had reached a verdict. They found Judith Ann Neelley guilty of the kidnap and murder of Lisa Milliken, and they recommended that she be sentenced to life in prison.
I can see that.
Rather than
She's
giving her
young.
the death penalty.
She's
right.
young.
She's 18, by the way. Despite this recommendation, sentencing was up to Judge Cole, and he had written 2 opinions. Ultimately, he decided that while Judith was young, she was also brazen and cruel. He thought the crimes had been heinous and atrocious, beyond which is common to most capital cases, and sentenced her to death.
Holy shit.
Yeah. When Judith heard this, she began to cry.
Wow. He usurped the jury's recommendation.
Like, fuck that. She's going, I'm going to put her on death row. Not wanting a second death sentence in another state, Judith ended up pleading guilty to the kidnap and murder of Janice Chapman in Tennessee, and she received a life sentence for that crime. Then she got 10 years for the shooting of John Hancock. It was her deal with Tennessee that spurred Alvin to finalize his own plea deal. Judith became the youngest woman to have been sentenced to death in Alabama. In a 1983 prison interview, she reportedly said, quote, "I pray for strength. I don't ask God for me not to be electrocuted. I just ask that if I'm going to be electrocuted, to give me strength to go through it," end quote.
Or he's kind of not going to have a choice.
I know. Judith appealed to get a new trial, but in March 1987, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected the appeal. Less than 2 years later, they let her death sentence stand. She converted to Christianity while she was in prison. She apparently developed a relationship with another woman who, on May 21st, 1994, was found dead at her home. She had shot herself.
What?
She developed this relationship with this other woman, and she was found dead. She had shot herself, leaving photographs and a cassette recording of her and Judith's fatal plan. Judith was found in her cell, her wrists slashed with a disposable razor, but she survived.
So it's going to be like
murder-suicide, or suicide-suicide kind of thing.
Okay.
Then there was more news. Alabama Governor Fob James decided that Judith didn't deserve to die for her crimes. Before he left office, he signed an order to commute her sentence to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This decision caused an outcry, so he defended his decision, stating he had given it long consideration and went through many documents, including letters pleading with him to reconsider Judith's case. The jury, he noted, had given her a life sentence, and it was the judge that had ruled for the death sentence. Governor James said that since the jury, who had seen all the evidence, had decided on leniency, and they had been chosen as Judith's peers, their recommendation was the proper one to follow. In response to the governor commuting Judith's sentence, lawmakers in 2003 passed a law that death row inmates who had their sentences commuted shall not be eligible for parole. Judith's attorney filed a lawsuit challenging the statute in its retroactive application to her case. The law was ruled unconstitutional in March of 2018, leading to her first parole hearing in May of 2018, where the Alabama Board of Pardons took only 55 seconds to deny her parole.
Oh.
However, even if Judith is granted parole, she would likely be arrested by Georgia authorities to serve her time for a consecutive life sentence in the rape and murder of Janice Chapman.
Oh, then what the fuck? What's the point?
I know. She's set to see the parole board again this month, May of 2023. Currently, she is the second longest serving female death row inmate in the country.
That sucks.
In case you're wondering what happened to Alvin,
I would like to know.
He died in prison in 2005.
Oh, how?
I don't know.
He just died.
He just died.
He wasn't old.
No. Well, he was 12 years older than her. No, he wasn't that old.
He wasn't that old.
Mm-mm.
Well, karma's a bitch.
Yeah, karma's a bitch. And so is he.
He is a bitch.
So that is my awful story of Alvin and Judith Neelley.
I never heard that.
I knew that she was the youngest person to be sentenced to death row.
Maybe if I saw her picture.
Maybe.
I would know.
But I would just like
Judith
to
what?
Neelley. Neelley. I would like to ask everyone to hit the subscribe or follow button if you haven't.
I don't like her.
No.
Just looking at the pictures. I don't like her.
And if you would like to hear more episodes that we have not released to the public, please check out patreon.com/TNTcrimes or go to our website and there's information there.
Yep.
crimesandconsequences.com. And you would not only get additional episodes, but you would also get our weekly free episodes, early release, and ad-free.
Yep, absolutely.
If you don't want to go there and you are listening on your Apple podcast app,
an iPhone.
I mean, you've got so many options. You can just subscribe through the Apple Podcast app, and you would get same episodes.
Why not?
Why not? Just do it. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Hardcore True Crime. And I think that's probably it.
That's good enough.
That's good enough.
Do we have shout-outs?
I didn't write them down, no.
Okay.
So we'll have to do it next time.
All right.
All right. Until our next episode.
Don't kill each other.
Bye.
Bye.